Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to lesson 1. And in this lesson on amphibian. And an amphibian, for this case, we are looking at particularly the toad and the frog. And in this particular lesson, we shall look at the habitat where these organisms live. We shall also look at the external characteristics of the amphibians, as well as the adaptations or how the features they possess enable them to survive in the habitat. So once again, welcome to Amphibian. But before we proceed with our lesson, I would like you to watch this video summarizing what amphibians are.
Hello everybody. Today we're looking at a really amazing group of vertebrates. When they're born, they usually live in water, but when they grow up and become adults, they spend most of their time on land. We present amphibians. All amphibians have some common characteristics that you should know about, so you can recognize and differentiate them. Amphibians have thin, bare skin with no hairs and scales to protect them. Most have 4 legs and a membrane between their toes that allows them to move much better in the water. Amphibians are oviparous, but they don't incubate their eggs after laying them. They abandon them and don't care for their young. Not very good parents, huh? When they hatch, they're small larvae and live in water. Slowly, very slowly, their bodies go through a process called metamorphosis. During this process, the body of the amphibian changes. Their front and rear legs, their limbs grow, and their heads and their bodies develop, so they finally look like their parents. In the early stages of their lives, amphibians breathe through gills. But when they grow up and become adults, they breathe with their lungs. The problem is, their lungs are very small and cannot get all the oxygen they need to live. But nature is very clever and has solved this problem by allowing them to breathe and get the oxygen they need through their skin. That's why they need to be near water to keep their skin wet. In the early stages of their life, some amphibians are herbivores, but when they grow up, most become carnivores. So they need to hunt. Some have a long, sticky tongue they shoot out to capture prey. Aren't amphibians fascinating and also a bit strange? So let's remember the most important characteristics. Amphibians are vertebrates. They're oviparous. In the early stages of their life, they live in water as larvae. But slowly they change so they look like parents.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks to YouTube for that wonderful video. So we proceed with our amphibians. So these are organisms that live both in water and The frogs and toads are the examples of the amphibians. Others include the salamanders, the newts, and the other amphibians as well. But for the purposes of this curriculum, we shall be focusing our attention majorly on the frogs and the toads. So let's start with the classification of the amphibians. The amphibians belong to, the green side is for the frog and the red one is for the toad. So they all belong to kingdom Animalia. They also all belong to phylum Chordata, and then class Amphibia. Of course, that's why they are called amphibians. Order Anura. And then from family is where we have divergent evolution, and that's where there are differences. So the frog belongs to family Buffonidae, and the toad belongs to family Ranidae. The frog belongs to genus Buffo, and then the toad belongs to genus Rana. The species of the frog, the one we are going to look at today, is Regularis, and then for the toad is Temporalis. So I hope you are able to classify the amphibians, especially the frog and the toad, at least up to the species level. Well, that's great. And we are going to compare the two. The frog and the toad quite look similar, but there are some differences that they possess that would like to take you through so that you can be able to differentiate between the frog and the toad. So we are going to look at the key differences between the two animals or two amphibians so that you can be able to identify or even differentiate between frogs and the toads. So when you look at the toad, let's start with the frog. The skin of the frog is very thin, it's wet, it's moist, and it is smooth. And in most cases, it is bearing some colors, either greenish or yellowish, yes, or brownish. Those are the colors of the frogs. Whereas for the toad, their skin is thick, dry, or less moist, and is bumpy. It has a rough surface because of the presence of the parotid glands. And then when you look at the legs of the frog, you realize that their legs are very long, especially the hind legs. They are longer, they are elongated, and the ones for the toad are less elongated, or you can say they are shorter. And then when you look at the movement type of the frogs, you realize that the frogs always jump. In most cases they jump, and that is the major way in which they move. And then for the toads, the commonest movement is small jumps or even walking. Have you ever seen the frog walking? Yes. That's very rare. You can always see them jumping from one place to the other. Whereas for the toads, they jump shorter, and in most cases they walk. The frogs live most of their lives in water, and of course that defines why their skin is always very moist or wet. Whereas for the toads, they live most of their time on land, and of course that's why their skins are always less moist. And then when you look at the mode in which they lay their eggs, you realize that the frogs lay their eggs in bunches or clusters. If you go to the pond where these organisms have laid their eggs, you realize that when you see the eggs in bunches or clusters, then it is most likely that those eggs have been laid by the frog. Whereas for the toad, their eggs are always laid in chains. Yes, or in strips. Great. Let's look at other differences here just to emphasize what we have looked at. We said that the frog, the skin is smooth, shiny, and moist, whereas the one for the toad is always rough, it's water and less moist. The legs of the frog are always very long, slender, flexible, and highly folded into the body. I hope you saw in that picture. And then the ones for the toad, the hind limbs are always averagely long. They are not so long compared to the ones of the frog. And then they are muscular and folded to the body. When you look at the body color, the one for the frog, you realize the colors are more, they are greenish or dark brown or yellowish. In other words, the body has, you would say, bright colors. Whereas for the toad, the body color is always dull and usually brown or gray or even black. So that is the color of the toad. So of the two, which one is more colored? Which one has brightly colored skin? Yes, it is the frog. And then when you look at the eyes of the frog, is that their eyes bulge out. It's easy to see, they are bigger. And then the ones for the toad are less bulging. They are not as big as those of the frog. However, all the two have big eyes. But of course, when you compare the size of the eyes relative to the size of the body, you realize the frogs have actually bigger eyes. And then when you look at the surface of the body of the frog, you realize it is smoother because it does not have glands, or if it has, they are highly vestigial or highly reduced. Whereas for the toad, the body surface is very rough because of the possession of the parotid glands that are used to secrete the toxin, the toxin that is used to scare away the predators. Well, we are going to look at more differences between the frog and the toad here, and I want you to watch this video so that you can appreciate more differences between the frog and the toad. Remember, as you watch this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you will be able to get more information on different subjects and more about biology as well. Yes, so let's watch this video and see the differences between the frog and the toad. It's taking a little bit of time, but we shall be able to see what these differences are. Okay, looks our video is failing to play, so we can proceed and look at the reasons for the phylum, the class, and the order. Remember, we classified these organisms into kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Amphibia, and order Anura. So we are going to look at the reasons why these organisms are put into those different taxa. So we are going to start with the phylum Chordata. And we say that the reasons why as chordates is because, one, they possess the vertebral column. How do you tell that they have the vertebral column? you can look at their back. You'll see a strip running from the head to the caudal area. That bony structure that you can feel from its back is what we call the vertebral. And of course, this is common for all the vertebrates, all the chordates. Yeah, they have the vertebral column. You can see much more clearer there. The actual location of the vertebral column there, we have labeled the vertebral bone there, D. So that strip that runs from the head to the caudal area is what we call the vertebral column. You may not be able to see it before dissection, but you can actually feel it because it is protruding on the back and you can easily feel. Yeah, the second one is possession of the pentadactyl limb system or pentadactyl limb plan. So what do we call the pentadactyl limb plan? So basically this is when the limbs set into 5 digits. That is what we call the pentadactyl limb plan. So when you look at the hind limbs of the toad or frog, you realize there are actually 5 digits. So that one is very clear example of the pentadactyl limb plan or limb system, and it's a characteristic for all the chordates. Yes, however, in some chordates, of course, this pentadactyl limb system is modified to perform different functions, but the limb plan can easily be traced. The third characteristic of chordates is having a bilateral body symmetry. Of course, this could be shared by other phyla as well, but we can recognize it much more clearly in the chordates. What do we call bilateral body symmetry? This is when the body of an organism can be divided into 2 equal parts along one plane, or 2 equal mirror-like parts along the same plane. So when you look at this organism here, you should be able to tell that the body can be divided into 2 equal mirror-like parts. That is what we call bilateral body symmetry. It's a characteristic of chordates. So let's look at class Amphibia. What are the reasons that we are going to give for us classifying this organism or putting it in class Amphibia? One of them is possession of the moist glandular skin or water skin. These organisms, the toads and the frogs, have a moist glandular skin, as you can see there, and this of course is used for cutaneous gaseous exchange. That's great. The second one is the wide gap. So you can see the wide gap, the mouth opens into a very wide gap, and of course it's an adaptation for ingesting large prey. So that is one of the characteristics of class Amphibia. The organisms have wide gap. The other one is they have webs between their digits of the hind limb especially. So when you look at the hind limbs of the amphibians, you realize they have webs between the toes or the digits. And those webs facilitate the movement, especially in water. Well, so let's move to class Anura. What are those characteristics that we are going to look at? And we appreciate that these are characteristics of members of class of order Anura. Sometimes order Anura is called Silentia. One is they have external eardrum, sometimes called the tympanic membrane or the tympanium. So for them, their hearing system starts from the eardrum, which is external. They do not have the external pinna, which is present in the mammals. For them, their hearing system starts from the eardrum, as you can see there, and is very much specialized and highly sensitive to sound. The other one is they have long hind limbs for leaping or hopping. So these organisms have very, very long hind limbs proportional to the body. They are very long and they are used for leaping or jumping a long distance. And then thirdly, the head and the trunk are fused. That means that there is no neck. These organisms do not have a clear neck. So, as you can see from there, the head and the trunk are joined together. And those are the members of Anura. However, other amphibians may have the necks. Those that belong to other orders, like order Caudata, those ones have the necks. But the Anura don't have. Great. So let's move to the habitats of the amphibians. Habitat means where do they stay? In case we sent you today to look for the amphibians, where would you get them? Well, the frogs are found in damp environments. For example, the grass near water, swamps, ponds, slow-moving streams. That's where you find them, in the wet places. So we say that frogs live in much more moist places compared to the toads for this case. And of course, the toads are found in less damp environments. For example, behind buildings, in the gardens, abandoned storage tanks, under the stones. That's where you can find them. In case you're going to look for them tonight, of course, these organisms are nocturnal. So if you are going to look for them, you have to go in the night, in the evening or very early in the morning. That's when you can find them. And in those places we have specified there. So we are going to see a video locating how these organisms can be attracted to live in our environments. In case you want them to stay in your farm, how do you attract them? And of course, as we know, these amphibians are good because they can consume insect parasites or insect pests that may affect our crops. So let's see how we can attract them or how we can coexist with the amphibians.
Well, Good Life presents How to Attract Frogs and Toads to Your Garden. Attracting and garden will help reduce pest populations naturally without the need for pesticides. They feed on many pests such as bugs, beetles, caterpillars, worms, grasshoppers, grubs, slugs, and a variety of other pests. A single frog can eat over 100 insects in one night. Here are some of the ways to attract frogs and toads to your garden. Pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, and herbicides poison frogs and toads. Frogs and toads breathe and drink through their skin. Offer shelter. Most toads and frogs are nocturnal and avoid sun to prevent dehydration. Create a shelter by arranging stones into a small cave. You can also use a clay or ceramic flower pot as housing. Turn the pot upside down and prop it with rocks, leaving enough room for the frog or toad to slip inside. Provide water. Toads and frogs don't drink through their mouth. Instead, they absorb moisture into their bodies by sitting in water. Place several shallow containers of water in the shade near the shelter. Just eat up to 10,000 pests during the garden season. Toads and frogs will often return to the same location year to year as long as the environment is pleasant and there is plenty to eat. Visit growagoodlife.com for more information.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks to YouTube for that wonderful video. So you can see that one frog can eat up to 10,000 insect pests. Yes, so this could be a good new discovered biological pest control method. So you can also try them out and attract them closer. Not only are they good for our study here, but they're also good for agriculture, especially when it comes to control of pests, as we have seen. And that's, of course, one of the reasons why we are studying this topic, to learn how to coexist with these organisms. So we want to ask finally the question, why do Amphibians live in water. In most cases, we have said they live near the water, they are damp places, wet places, and so on. What is the magic? Yes, so there are three major reasons. The first one is to keep the skin moist for cutaneous respiration or cutaneous gaseous exchange. Of course, we said that these organisms conduct gaseous exchange across the skin. And one of the characteristics of gaseous exchange surfaces is that they have to be moist. So that is the reason why they must keep near the water or in the water in order to keep their skins moistened. The other one is to easily escape from predators or enemies. I am very sure that you've heard frogs crying or making noise at night. When you move closer to them, you don't see them anymore. Yes, simply they dive into the water and the predators cannot see them. So being near water is a very good protection measure against predators. And then the other one, of course, and which is the most important, is they lay their eggs in the water. These organisms have not yet evolved to lay shelled eggs. So therefore, their eggs stand a very high chance or a very high risk of losing water in case they are laid outside the water. So therefore, the eggs must be laid in water. Even if these organisms live on land, when it comes to breeding season, they always have to return to water. So you can now appreciate why these organisms live near water. So thank you so much. This has been lesson 1. In case you have enjoyed the lesson, please subscribe to this YouTube channel for much more important or good lessons like this one you have listened to. Thank you.